be starting up in about another 5 to 10 minutes. And thank you for your patience. At this time, we'd like to call to order our fiscal year 2022 City Manager proposed annual operating budget. At this time, all our budgetary, and turn it over to our City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem and members of council and the viewing public. Today, we will hear the wrap-up, at least, of the presentations of the proposed budget, particularly the other funds. And then we'll follow that with a discussion of what has been proposed to council for your consideration. However, before we move to the agenda, I do want to make sure that I clarify a few items surrounding the camera proposal that we submitted. The system that we submitted and the costs that are in the budget only reflects the installation of cameras on the corridors. It does not at all take into account expanding this program to businesses or to residents. And I think also the media coverage of a program, I think that's initiated by the mayor and of which Councilmember Walker participated in, caused a great deal of confusion among the community. So what is being proposed in no way is associated with the ADT Ring program that the mayor has initiated. And again, in the proposed budget is only the funds that would establish cameras along the corridors. The police department has identified 5 specific locations, which of course we will not disclose. And there will be, I believe it's 19 cameras that will be installed at those various locations. That cost, again, that is budgeted, is a total of $122,272. And at the last discussion or presentation to the Mayor Pro Tem and Council, we gave you a breakdown of what those costs are. If, of course, at some time in the future, there's an interest to go in that direction, as the council noted, they would want, or you would want, to see a policy that addresses any of the privacy issues and so forth. And so with that, I just want to make sure that the council understands what has been recommended and is still the recommendation in the proposed budget.
Yeah, I feel like I ought to respond a little bit too. I'm sorry for any confusion that was created. ADT was very cooperative as an institutional organization to provide us with some cameras that we were able to distribute out into the community. Folks who were feeling as if they were not safe or looking for some other aid in providing deterrence to potential crime. And so we worked through that to try to find that as an opportunity. It's a wonderful opportunity for some of our residents. It's not in any way designed to be connected to what the city manager was talking about. I apologize for any confusion associated with that. Although I do think it's a good thing. I do think that it's a great opportunity that we had. And I hope that we see some progress and some results from this. And if we don't, we don't. But it at least was worth an attempt based on some complaints that I was receiving from a number of our residents here in the city of Rock. Yes, ma'am.
Were the police or their crime statistics taken into consideration in choosing the neighborhoods or the houses in which these cameras were installed?
No, ma'am. Again, to be clear, the cameras are only going to be installed on the corridors. And they're the corridors that are associated with the shot spotter incidents that is already recorded, in the police department.
I understand that. Again, it goes back to the confusion of these things having been publicized about the same time. But the article in the paper about the cameras that to be installed to make people more secure in their homes indicated that, as the mayor mentioned, the company is providing those. And so I understand that's not city funds, but given that the mayor of the city or council member are kind of responsible for that, or accomplished that, were the houses chosen for the installation of those cameras chosen based on the crime statistics and the and our neighborhoods that were particularly disadvantaged by crime.
That's a question for the mayor.
Sure. In terms of how they were selected, Councilman Walker was very helpful in identifying a number of folks. It really came down to those who wanted the cameras and who wanted to participate. It started with a number of people presenting to me, saying, hey, look, I don't feel safe. You know, I flow it through the normal channels. More police, rotations and patrols through the area, of course, occurred. And this was just sort of a thinking outside the box that apparently has taken on a life unto itself, one which was certainly unintended. However, I do think that it's of benefit, at least to those individuals who received it. In terms of the science-specific notations as to why, who they were picked, I don't have that data for you, Councilperson Miller.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilman Knight?
Yes, it was very confusing, Mayor, when you publicly and say it's a city-led initiative that makes the citizens and the viewers of WRAL and whoever watching that it's a city-led effort. And that was during the same time that we were having a discussion about the cameras. So my question to you, who are we? When you say we, that means you privately and your staff, or are you including this council, the city manager, and the chief of police, and this staff at City Hall 1 Government Plaza? Because I think what is happening when you roll out something and you are the mayor and you say it's a city-led effort, and city members or council members have no knowledge of what you are doing. And if you're doing it privately, fine. But if you go on nationwide TV and say it's a city-led effort, then that's confusing people. And I had several calls asking how people were chosen and what are we doing and so forth and so on. So in the future, I hope that you would clarify if you're doing it yourself, fine. But if it's city-led, please let it come through this council.
I think I've been clear on that tonight. And if you have a list of folks who are interested and I can accommodate, I will certainly do everything I can do in my means to try to provide the same opportunity for those individuals. Not promising that I can, but certainly we'll go fight the fight.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I'll give you a list after the council meeting.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councilman Knight. City Manager.
Thank you. So the first item on our agenda is, again, the presentation of the proposed budget and other funds. And so Mr. Hunter will make this presentation.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everybody. We've gone on last Wednesday, we went through the general fund and the enterprise funds, which comprise 6 of the funds that are part of our annual operating budget for fiscal year 2022. Tonight, we're going to go through 5 additional funds that are part of this budget. So this is area that's covered in your notebook under tab 6. So we will start with the Powell Bill Fund. And the Powell Bill Fund, of course, is tied to those revenues that we receive from our annual Powell Bill allocation from the state, as well as also the revenues that we receive per our projects related to the Congestion Mitigation Air Quality Grant Program. Total expenditures in fiscal year 2022 as proposed are $3,088,000. This is a decrease of $1.293 million. And I want to clarify again, just to keep providing that reminder, that one of the significant changes that we've made is that the money, the revenue that is generated for surface transportation through the vehicle license fee is now expended for in the general fund. And for several years, we expended in the Powell Bill Fund, and we've changed that. We actually changed it this current fiscal year through a budget amendment that you adopted in April. But it's, of course, going to go forward with each fiscal year, and that will alleviate any problems that we have with the tracking of funds with NCDOT. Along with the primary items that are included in this allocation for appropriation, all these items are also included in the surface transportation portion of the CIP, include corridor improvements, the CMAQ sidewalk improvements, several bike route projects, which are now ready for execution. And as I mentioned before, the proceeds from 80% of the vehicle license fee have been moved back to the new Service Transportation Division of Public Works, which is in the general fund. The next fund to talk about is the Emergency Telephone, also known as the E911 Fund. This fund is specifically to appropriate expenditures that qualify for the use of the state appropriation that we receive each year from telephone taxes for E911 telecom operations. And it's a very restrictive utilization of this funding. The state does not provide a lot of provide a lot of latitude in terms of how these monies can be spent. They cannot be used for telecommunications staffs. That's paid for out of the general fund through the police department. So primarily what this money goes to is to pay for the phone service itself, to pay for some items related to software and some equipment in the call center. That's primarily what this money goes to. We also used a significant amount of the fund balance from this fund a couple of years ago to meet the state's mandated requirement that we have a backup call center operation ready to go, and that's located at Fire Station 7. One other thing that we've noticed is that this payment from the state is typically based on prior collections that they've received of the E911 revenues, and that's the reason why that's gone down significantly. It's actually around $307,000 this year, or what we anticipate in fiscal year 22. We've received notice from the state that that's basically how much they anticipate giving to us. And again, this is due to the fact that obviously this is a landline fee along with a cell fee, and obviously landline sales have continued to drop dramatically. Most people have switched over to a wireless carrier, and so that obviously affects the revenues. Again, this budget is still used to fund eligible expenses, which are more than covered with the $325,000 appropriation. Again, primarily the phone service contract, a little bit of software, and also some equipment, and also some money set aside for equipment replacement if necessary. The next fund is the Canteen Fund, Agency Fund. This is a fund which is comprised of many different little accounts, and this basically reflects funds that are not generated by tax dollars, and they're intended for specific allocated purposes. The reason why it's kind of called the Canteen Fund is because one of the primary accounts that's in there is the revenue that we receive from vending machines, our share of vending machine revenues for vending machines that are located inside city facilities. But there's also funds tied to some scholarship programs, including the Summer Camp Scholarship Program, which is primarily funded through the parking fees that we generate at the Down East Viking Football Classic, some internal fundraising that's done for the United Way and the American Heart Association, and the most significant amount of money that comes into this fund is the money that is received to our police department from both the state and federal governments as a portion of their asset forfeiture allocations. And that's the reason for the $88,690 increase, is purely on the basis of that. And the way it works is that as you go through the expenditure summary, on pages 6-4 and 6-5, for each account that you see that there's an expenditure account, there's a corresponding revenue account at the same amount. So these accounts are controlled so that we don't spend any more than what's been already collected in revenue. And that is done on an annual basis. The next two funds that I will talk about, and these are the final two funds in this presentation for other funds, have to deal with internal service funds. And the way internal service funds work is that the revenues for internal service funds are generated from the other operating funds. They pay into these funds, and these funds are dedicated for specific purposes to cover certain collective expenditures. The first one has to do with health insurance. We are proposing a budget in the health insurance internal service fund of $10.13 million, which is an increase of $400,000. That increase is tied to the claims cost associated with retired employees, and we were able to, of course, identify funds in the budgets to provide the additional money to offset that. We do not, as we looked at the coverage, we look at this annually. You approved, of course, the contract extension for Aetna, I believe, at the last council meeting, if not that one, the one before. And so we will be with them for a fourth year this coming year. And so we've been very happy with the services that have been provided by Aetna. And as a result, we do not anticipate needing to make any changes to the current premium. And that premium's been set. We've already had open enrollment for our employees and retirees, and also for some of you who received the insurance. And we are not going to be changing the current premiums in the upcoming fiscal year. Those premiums will stay the same, both for active employees as paid by the city and active employees as paid by the employee. And then the last fund is the Internal Service Fund for Communications. This is responsible for the cost associated by our internal telephone system as well as our internal radios. It also covers the cost associated with wireless devices, and all of that is managed by the communications staff, which are part of the Department of Technology Services. That budget overall did not change. It remained at $1,571,250. We actually did see a reduction in our annual maintenance and service contracts, primarily for our radio system. That was a multi-year contract that you all passed in 2020 and started in fiscal year 2021. There is, of course, funding in there for our annual radio replacements. We do try to replace radios on a certain number of radios on an annual basis. There is also some additional funding for some ancillary equipment associated with radios and telephones. One item that was paid for this year is that, and I think it was done by an amendment, was the replacement of our telephone system. If you've seen our telephones, not our system, but our telephones, if you've noticed in most of the offices, we finally have new phones, and they were about 20 years old at least, and we were finally able to get them replaced with a modern system. So we were very fortunate for that, and that's already taken place. So this concludes the presentation with respect to other funds. What I would like to do now is just take a couple of minutes, and this, of course, will lead into the discussion that you'll have on the budget. And that's talk about the additional funding requests that we have received from council that we did show you at the end of our presentation on the general fund and enterprise funds last week. All the changes that have been made in the general fund. All the other funds remain the same. What this does is it shows you the department, it shows you the account that would be allocated, and of course, and then gives you discussion of what it is. And you will see at the top are the expenditures, and at the bottom are the corresponding revenue adjustments needed to balance. So starting with expenditures, we talked about this last time with respect to the Heritage Research Consultant. That would be a $20,000 additional appropriation in the city manager's office under a consultant account. Typically, when it comes to the city manager's office divisions, about 50% of their costs are adjusted with respect to the administrative service charge. So we would increase the admin service fee by $10,000, which reduces the general fund budget. You also see $20,000 for marketing for downtown and business development, and $150,000 the appropriation to establish the Ready Grant program, which Kevin Harris presented back to you at the retreat. That was one that we did not include originally, and we are wishing to include it. Combined, that's $170,000, which means an $85,000 adjustment, reverse adjustment in the admin service fee. The next item is in Public Works in the Surface Transportation Division, and that's to expand surface transportation improvements by $500,000. The next item is in Parks and Recreation and Neighborhood Service and Neighborhood Programs, and that's for the youth neighborhood sports camps. We talked about this last time, and that's $40,000. The next two lines, first line is for the would be for African American enrichment programs at the Booker T. Washington Community Center, $50,000, as well as enrichment programs of the same type at South Rocky Mount Community Center, which would be another $50,000. And then the last item, which is in development services, and this would affect multiple accounts because it's a position, so it affects salary and benefit accounts, would be the additional of one full-time building trades inspector who would be focused on downtown, and the total cost of that would be about $65,000. So total net cost would be $800,000, which adjusts the revised proposed budget to $79,484,350. In order to balance, we reviewed revenues, and as I had mentioned during our early revenue, we had been very conservative with respect to sales tax. Our original estimates on sales tax were around about a 1.5% to 2% increase compared to where we thought we would finish out this current fiscal year. Upon further evaluation in terms of what we've done on an annual basis, plus we're still in the lead-up period and with respect to this redistribution of funds from the larger 20 counties to the smaller 80 counties, and some other indicators, including what the mayor had said about inflation, we felt that we could project a 4% increase and feel still comfortable about that allocation. So by making the 4% adjustment, we were able to increase the Nash County sales tax by $225,000 and the Edgecombe tax to $75,000. We then, as we talked about before, with respect to the surface transportation improvements, are appropriating the designated fund balance for surface transportation of $500,000. There's well over $3 million that was returned to the general fund for this purpose earlier this year. So this is about less than 1/6 of that amount. So that generates the necessary $800,000 in revenue that's required to balance the budget for these intended purposes.
At this time, thank you. At this time, we will open for any questions.
Given that we are funding the downtown program, kind of we reducing funding to the Chamber of Commerce for the office? No, ma'am. Other than the request that the president made maybe a year ago, and we're continuing with the reduction in the lease payment to the city to help them also recover from the COVID. And that's the only reason why that would be reduced.
Thank you, Mr. Blackwell. The offices that we occupy there, we're paying for those, right? And we're providing for, well, from my point, Alan Matthews' office, he had been housed there in his capacity, and I understand he's one of those that will be moved to a street site.
He will be moved into the new downtown
Right, exactly.
office. Yes, ma'am.
So I was thinking that that would accomplish some savings in terms of what we spend for office space there at the,
Yeah, not, if so, it would be very minimal, because it still requires to keep, the lights on and heating and air conditioning and so forth. So one vacant office would not really substantially reduce the chamber's budget. And again, the only consideration that we're given, and I think council has approved or will approve soon, is to continue the reduced lease payment back to the city for their space in the train station. And again, that's due to their, at their request, to hopefully recover from the COVID problems that they've had with membership.
thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Miller. Any other questions? Councilman Andre Knight.
Yes, and thank you, City Manager, for doing a good job. I just want to make mention about, over the weekend I heard a lot of people asking for more support in the Ready Grant. And the way I explained it, I said, first of all, we'd like to thank the city manager for even considering putting it in the budget for this year. But from my understanding, it was a group that was going to come and ask, first of all, thank the council for what they've been doing, and you, city manager. And that is my understanding, several shovel-ready projects that they were looking for the council, the city, to help incentivize some of those projects, because of the banks were not lending, or the banks are saying to people who want to invest in our downtown that they were not ready to do that, or didn't trust well, they didn't feel comfortable in investing in downtown. And we don't really know why, when we just built this event center, and most of the banks are located downtown. But people are having a hard time from getting loans from local banks. And so they were hoping that through this budget, or maybe some of the money from the CARES Act, that we could put some more money into the Ready Grant. So I don't know if we're going to discuss that today, but maybe the next council meeting, if that group come, then you can hear from them, and then we can go from there. I was just letting you know what I've heard, and asking for the support. And they do, this group, or several people from this group, do want the knowledge that they thank the council and Councilman Blackwell and you for pushing downtown development. So I just wanted to make that known today.
Thank you, Councilman Knight. City Manager, you could respond to that you meet with that group, and let's see what can we do for that.
Oh, sure. I think at the next meeting, which will be the 14th, I believe, when we have the public hearing, I suspect that they will come forward and express their concerns and their thanks, should the council move forward with the recommendation.
Councilman Blackwell.
Yes, thank you. With some level of flexibility in the budget going forward, perhaps one of the things that we could keep in mind is a definition of what shovel-ready means for us, and maybe where the gaps are, and looking at what our anticipated return on whatever we invest could be. So that would be great to hear that there are investors ready and willing to do some large transformative projects. I hope that's what we are talking about, some things that will really transform and maybe move us closer to that goal of bringing more people from various income levels living in downtown to keep the progress going.
Thank you, Councilman Blackwell. Any other questions at this time? Councilman Daltrich.
Today, when I was going over, after what we spoke about yesterday, and was looking over the budget again, and I've had this question even before I joined council, and I want to make sure I'm understanding correctly. The transfers that we have in the interfund transfers, I think is what they're referred to, which come from the utility accounts. And based on a memo that I found, is this still accurate where we can transfer of the 3% of the fixed assets in the electric fund, 75% of the gas fund, and 50% of the water fund on those two for the income, which this year, if I'm reading correctly, from the utility accounts are added correctly, which I guess is what I want confirmation on, is $2,550,000. Is that, do you know if that's correct, Mr. Hunter?
So we calculated those, the amounts that we have in as transfers were based on the calculations, which is based on the most recent completed annual financial report. So that we based on information as of June 30th, 2020. And so those calculations were done, and the amounts that you see in there as transfers are at or below what is allowed under the policy in those cases. The policy, as you stated, that is correct. So It is 3%. It is 3% of asset value for the electric fund, and for the gas fund, it is 75% of net income, and then for the water fund, it's 50%.
Okay, and then one that I've always had a little difficult understanding, and is admin service charge. And if I understand that correctly, that's coming from the utilities, specifically the electric fund, I believe.
It comes from all the utilities.
All the utilities.
The electric, gas, water, sewer, and stormwater fund all contribute to that.
And that's based off of the percentage that the general fund or the different departments are supporting, I guess, the utility funds. Is that correct, or am I totally?
That is correct. There, as you note, that not every department or division in the general fund receives money from the administrative service fee. It is primarily for those that are involved in administration, economic development, or some type of support operation. Like, for example, in Public Works, there are two divisions in Public Works that receive it that have to do with engineering, because they're involved in activities that are associated with supporting the utilities. But for the most part, it's city council, it's the city clerk, city manager's office, human resources, because they do provide some support in customer care with respect to utility customers, finance, central services, and then I don't think development services, community and business development. So those are the departments that we primarily expense, reverse expense for the administrative service charge. And that, again, those calculations were actually where we did review those expenses to some degree, and we typically kind of try to line them up with over time with the anticipated costs associated with the fact that we have the utilities, and these departments are responsible for providing services to these utilities as well as to general government departments.
So if we add up what's projected for the remainder of this year of all the admin service charges and interfund transfers, you're looking at about $26,500,000 or $440,000 for projected, and then 2022, if my math is correct, we're just shy of $30 million transferring essentially from the utilities over into the general fund. So if I understand correctly, in my brain, about 35% of our, well, before today, of the $78,684,000 general fund is supported by the utilities.
In terms of the respect of the fact that those departments, of course, are providing an expanded level of service as part of being utility operating cities, that is correct. It is an expense that is paid for. It is also an expense that was related to the nature of the services and the programs that are associated with us being a full-service utility city.
Okay, you've answered my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Daughtry. Thank you, Mr. Hunter. Is there any other questions before us? If there is no other questions before us, I turn it over to the city manager as we move forward.
Thank you. Then, of course, we will prepare the budget with the recommended increases that we have identified, as well as the offsetting revenue for public hearing then to be held June 14th.
That is correct,
Yes.
with adoption scheduled for June 28th.
Very important date, June the 28th, adoption.
Mr. Daughtry.
Follow-up question. The thick book that we had for the CIP,
Yes.
is that going to be placed on the city's website so the public has access to that?
I apologize if it's not. I thought I had done that. If it's not, we're going to get that to you. We'll get that done tomorrow.
Okay, it could be, and
It's entirely possible either way. We will take care of it.
okay, thank you, because I've had questions on it.
Yes.
Thank you, city manager. Thank you, Mr. Hunter. Thank you, staff of our city, for a very fine job. Our city council, our mayor. At this time, our meeting is adjourned.
Pinch me.